In Iraq, people are voting today for a new parliament. The country is trying to move past decades of war and repression under the dictator Saddam Hussein, and since the US-led invasion that toppled him. Even now, though, Iraq is still suffering from poor infrastructure, failing public services, and endemic corruption. We're going to talk more about this now with author and political scientist specializing in the Middle East, Myriam Benraad. Thanks so much, Myriam, for taking the time to join us now live from Marseille. Both the US and Iran closely watching this election. Why is it such a pivotal one?
I would not say that this is a pivotal election. It's the sixth election. And as you said, a lot of Iraqis either won't vote or will vote with very few expectations, because the various legislative elections since 2005 were quite a deception. But this can be an important moment, I would say, because of the wider regional environment, and of course how much this election will question or not the ties of Iraq with Iran in particular, the role that the US is seeking to regain in the country with the, as you know, the nomination of a new special envoy. So I would say that this is an interesting election from that point of view. Internally, as I said, there is a certain apathy on the side of the Iraqis. They don't expect much, unfortunately.
So do you think that this vote is just going to leave the same parties in power, or might we see some change?
I think there is a growing loss of interest in politics. This is the problem. So what used to be anger turning into protests no longer really exists. There is a lot of indignation and anger, but it's no longer, this dissatisfaction is no longer being transformed into movements of protest against the established elites and, more widely, I would say, the system. And we're not either seeing the emergence of a new political generation who could have another project. So this is why a lot of young Iraqis are not really focused on these elections, which they consider, as I said, to be a perpetuation of the existing structures. I think the whole question today is to see whether the role that the US wants to regain in the country could change the situation, especially regarding the role played by Shia militias closely linked to Tehran. I think one other challenge is to what extent the nationalist factions, coalitions will how they will perform in this election. This will say a lot, I think, about the general sentiment and the quest for sovereignty, for renewed sovereignty, which I think is a key demand. But overall, the deception has been too long, so I'm not expecting much from this new election.
And is that deception, do you think, why people are predicting that the turnout for this election is going to be quite low?
Yeah, I think we can expect a very low turnout because of the fact, as I said, that we've seen some progress. I'm not saying that Iraq is in the same situation as it used to be 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We've seen some progress. There has been a beginning of reconstruction. We've seen the rehabilitation of cities destroyed, especially during the last war against Daesh. We've seen entire territories recovering, but it's not enough. As you said, the governance is dysfunctional. There is a very high level of unemployment, especially among the youth. The corruption is endemic. The same thing goes for clientelism, and as I said, this whole system that seems to function completely outside of society. And the last election in 2021 was a major disappointment, which I think also explains why many Iraqis won't even go to the polling stations, because they are not going to think that it's likely to bring any significant change.
And I was mentioning things are difficult for many Iraqis. There's poor infrastructure, failing public services, corruption. How would you describe the situation for Iraqis day to day at the moment?
So as I said, I think there's a lot of progress on the security side, we're no longer, if you remember, going through this nightmare when we used to have terrorist attacks on a daily basis in this country. The Islamic State was reduced to a minimum. We've talked of a resurgence, but I don't think we're seeing any of this. I'm not going to tell you that the situation is fully stabilized, but this is now a country where you can go as a tourist, as a traveler, that you can discover, where you can travel, that you can cross without fearing for your life. So this is the major, I would say, the major source of progress. But a lot of infrastructure is not repaired, indeed. And as you know, the infrastructure in Iraq has been destroyed, damaged for decades. And we are not seeing the reforms, the socioeconomic reforms that this society, which is extremely young, is expecting. So I don't know what the future holds, but the future could hold renewed protests and movements against the government. I'm not seeing this at the moment, but it could be the result, the outcome.
Myriam, thank you. Myriam Benraad there, political scientist specializing in the Middle East. Thanks so much.